I got two responses. I either got to promise them all A's or get harder, right? Make it worse, right? Which
That's what I've done. I promised them all A's.
or did you incite them to say bad things about me?
That is also true.
No, there are.
I can blame it on my family. I mean, you know my brother too, so you know.
If I can't,
Yes, I do.
They're not going to defend themselves anyway, right?
Right, that's right. This is going to be a fun chapter, I think. The theme of chapter 6 is capacity, and so I wrote us an outline. They define capacity, and then they're going to come up with multiple ways to evaluate it, and they're going to do this Ellison example and Tracy's hair example to study some of these ways to evaluate. Then they're going to talk about some disparate topics relative to capacity, like theory of constraints, waiting line, and Little's law. And I know you guys have talked about these in the Lean class. And so when you look at this chapter, you know, the chapter appears like a shotgun, which I think it kind of is. You know, I mean, this topic does that to us in a way. You know, it's broad and not deep. And so yeah, we're going to touch on capacity and these things related to capacity. But that's okay, because in my mind, that's the idea, is to try to get you aware of things, places, tools that you can dig deeper if you need to. So at the end, we've got this case study of Foster's coffee, and then you'll notice in the book there's the supplement, chapter 6S, which I'll open there, is advanced waiting line. So I'll cover it. And then once we get into that, as you go through the view graphs and the study on it, it ends pointing to doing simulation modeling. And so I'll go into that. And I promised you last time that I was going to talk to you about simulation modeling and discrete or discrete event simulation. And so that's where I'll bring it up. Again, I'll touch on it. It would be a full class. I mean, several classes to do, but I think it's important to introduce it. I think it's an important tool, and if we want to do more on it, we can do more. And I've got, I use ExtendSim, so I'll introduce it, I'll show you it, but I'll also show you a couple of examples, simulation modeling on Excel, which will tie into the Monte Carlo simulation, which they mentioned in the 6S too. So that's kind of where it's going. So again, if it appears like it's, wow, this is a lot of weird stuff, because some of the things they touch on in here, in fact, I looked at the chapter and I'm like, wow, I've taught some of these topics in engineering econ. I've taught some of them in statistics. I've taught some of them in lean and some of them in here. And it's like, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Capacity runs our whole way. So if you feel that way when you look at it too, if you feel like, oh, this is all over the map, it is. but you can at least get a touch, get a surface understanding, and then if we want to go deeper, if you need to go deeper in some of your for some of your capstones, it's there. So that's where we're headed. I think it'll be pretty clear. It's a pretty well done set of view graphs, and I like the chapter read well. So let's do it. Let's get going and see what we think. So capacity, if it comes up there, yeah. So again, they want you to be able to understand, define capacity. They want you to be able to measure it, evaluate it, distinguish between theoretical and rated capacity, look at different ways to approach your capacity, whether you want to lead, match, or lag, and that kind of makes sense. They're going to do some break-even analysis. They're going to do decision trees, learning curves. And you see, thinking, well, learning curves. I just taught that in engineering econ. So we'll learn about all these things, and believe me, these things are used. I've used all of them out at Y12. We actually had learning curves built into our models and stuff, and so it's important. Theory of constraints you had in the lean class and Little's law, so we'll touch on those again, but you've seen them already. Waiting line theory is very interesting, and this does a nice little summary of waiting line theory. And again, it'll lack the mathematical rigor, but I think that's okay, because at least it makes it usable. And then we'll finish up with the discrete event stuff. So let's see. So first, let's define capacity, and I think you would all be able to give this definition. It's what can you do? Now it might be it's personal capacity. The worker It might be the machine, it might be the work center, it might be the plant, it might be the whole organization, but how much throughput can you get done with what you've got? And then, you know, you're gonna have to come up with ways to measure it, can you change it? And, you know, how does it impact your supply chain, and how does the supply chain impact you? Okay, so let's see. So they want to distinguish between two ways to measure capacity. Either come up with a theoretical or a rating. And I think you can understand the difference in that just from their terms, right? You know, the theoretical would be the best you could do. You know, you've got no preventative maintenance, no downtime, none of the things that add a lot of variability. What's the best this system could possibly do? And then rated is what does it do, you know? And what does it do not today or, you know, in an instantaneous point, but what does it do in the aggregate average, including things like downtime, shutdown, unplanned deliveries, those sort of things. And so you can see how, you know, one could be a target or one could be a benchmark. And well, either one of them could be a benchmark. This could be a benchmark too. As you start getting capacity worse than your rated capacity, something's happening, something's changed. You can see why you would need to distinguish between the two. So they're going to give some examples of different capacities based on different businesses. And let's see. The automatic car wash, cars per hour, is one that they wind up revisiting back here when we do the advanced waiting line theory. They have Lux car wash, and they will actually look at applying some of these capacity measurements to that. And so, yeah, their measure is cars per hour. In fact, that's what they do in the example. And you can see things that would impact it. And all different things, you know, hey, a law firm would be billable hours, textile plant, how much you can get out. And things that affect it, yeah, number of machines, number of lawyers, yeah. It's always number of a resource, a limited resource, if you will, whether it's personnel, machines, materials, yeah, and you can see how we talked about in the lean class and the theory constraints, and we'll do that. You know, the bottleneck and the constraint can change and move, and you want to address the most restrictive one, and then as you address it, you know, another one's in place. And you know, the question comes looking at many systems, are they all stacked together? You know, if you fix one bottleneck, is the next one right beside it almost the same, or is there a huge bit of difference between them? And the Tracy's hair salon example here, we'll talk about that and look at bottlenecks in a simple way. Let's see. So yeah, things that could affect it, yeah. How many parallel lines you have, the number of shifts, people, yeah, storage, that was always an interesting one, at Y12 especially. How many different products you have going through the line, right? Different changeover times or fixture setup times. Your quality and quality improvement. You know, you can see everything about your manufacturing system or your service system is going to affect your throughput, and to different levels. So now let's distinguish between these strategies they're talking about, whether you want to lead, lag, or match. And so, you know, lead, you're coming out ahead of it. You're trying to anticipate your demand, set up your capacity ahead of time. You know, lag, you're going to wait till the demand materializes and then make your capacity match it. And then, you know, match, you're going to try to strike a balance between the lead and lag, and don't be overutilized or underutilized. And so they got a nice little graph of that here. You know, again, I think this sort of thing depends on you, your organization, your aversion to risk, those kind of things. Because clearly, and the book talks about this, you know, if you're doing a lead strategy, it's more risky. You're adding capacity before the demand materializes. And if you're doing a lag strategy, well, the risk there is that you're annoying your customers, or you're not meeting your demand. People are going to look for sources elsewhere, and then, you know, you lose the business. And so, you know, we'd all like to say, well, let's just match, you know, and that may not be possible because of the lead times. You know, we talked about it at Y12, the simulation model. I helped on the training. And when you looked at a new person coming in and all the different trainings they had to do and all the different times where the training courses lined up, and depending on where the person was being placed, it could easily be, you know, a year before someone is ready to work, not even counting getting clearance. Just to line up all the right trainings they had to have. And that's, that's a challenge. You can't just say, well, give me a new guy tomorrow and expect to have him there. And whether you got the machines or not, it might be hard to match capacity. And so this is an interesting strategy, but then they don't go much beyond that, just a discussion and be aware of it. So what we'll do now, they'll break into different ways to evaluate capacity, and they're going to do that through a series of examples. So they're first they're going to lay out, well, look, your capacity can be evaluated on a bunch of different vectors, is the way I think about it. You can look at your capacity evaluated as relative to the cost, minimizing cost. You could look at it in respect to your demand, and how does your demand drive capacity, and how are you meeting demand. Value, your expected value from your rate of return, a decision tree, which one provides the best rate of return, break even, where does one alternative trump another, and learning curves. How does your capacity ability to meet capacity and meet demand improve through time? So you can see, I made the comment that I taught this in this topic, some of these topics in graduate and engineering econ class. Yeah, look, expected value, what that cost? I mean, those are engineering econ words. Break even, you can see how this is going to just tie in to the financial bottom line. Where do the statistics run into? Well, statistics come in here in decision trees, and you'll see when we get into the example, when you're trying to decide between alternatives, one way to evaluate the alternatives is to assign them a probability, and then evaluate the decision, which one's going to have the highest probability of giving you the best rate of return. Or you can tie that to an expected value, come up with an expected value based on the probabilities, or it ties in here when you finally do modeling, if you want to have expected outcomes, probabilistic outcomes. And so we'll touch on all of that in this chapter. So you can see how this chapter starts broadening because of the fact that you're trying to understand something that has a lot of variables that are input to it, has a lot of variables that are loosely understood or at least have probabilistic outcomes. And so you can see, well, gee, that has statistics, it has finances, it has decisions in it. And so we'll evaluate it on all of these perspectives. So jump right into the first one. They're going to do cost. All right. So one of the things they talk about when you model cost is you generally have a fixed cost and a variable cost, right? You've got some upfront equipment that's going to cost you something, or upfront cost to train people, upfront cost to establish a delivery system is the example they talk about in here. And then there's a variable cost per unit. And depending on what system you're looking at and what you're modeling, these can be zero, right? You'll see in the example, in fact, right away, the fixed cost on one of the options is nothing, but then the variable cost is more. And so we'll model things like this. There are other models in the engineering econ book that I use. They add another term for with the 1 over x that's kind of related to other nonlinear things. You don't have to have this model, but this is a good simple model. You could have a square and cube relationship if you want to on there, but this is what we'll work with today. All right. So they're going to do Ellison Seafood Company for about 4 or 5 view graphs, and what they want to do is use it to evaluate various alternatives and look at break-even analysis. Okay, so they're shipping fresh seafood within the kind of a local region, and they've got 3 alternatives. They've got just a UPS, if you will, anybody deliver for you, and then a contractor where you could actually hire a trucking company, or they can get their own shipping line. So 3 alternatives. You can see 3 increasingly higher levels of commitment, right? Here you just call up UPS. I need my fish shipped. Here, I'm going to write a contract, so maybe I have to negotiate that at least on a quarterly basis or something like that. And then here, I'm jumping into the trucking business, and so you got to and they're going to cost less as you go down, but your commitment's more. So let's evaluate these options in a couple of different ways relative to cost. So the first thing they did, and the book has a little more details, but they said, hey, let's just look at each one of them from a fixed cost and a variable cost perspective. So each of the three options are here. If I can get my head out of the way. Can you guys see them over there? Yeah. There's the UPS version, the contract, and the leasing. And so the UPS, you don't have to pay anything fixed, right? You just call them up, come get it. But every shipment's $750. Okay. The contractor, you got a down payment, if you will, or like a leasing agreement almost, $5,000, and then the variable cost is $300 per shipment. And then you start your own trucking company, well, you got to lease a bunch of trucks, $21,000, and it's only $50 per shipment. Now, yeah, I mean, you got gas, you got maintenance, somebody's got to drive the truck. But how this example is always contrived. But I'm trying to point out too, one of the topics in engineering econ we spend a little bit of time on is don't miss significant pieces of cost in your model. That's your biggest source of error. That seems low, but okay. Maybe they have a lot of shipments, right? Okay. So they've plotted them all. So right away with a simple plot, you can see based with the x-axis number of shipments and the y-axis cost, you can quickly see which one you want to do. Depending on your business, right? Based on demand. I mean, if I'm doing just a few shipments, well, hey, I don't want to be in the trucking business. I don't want to have a bunch of trucks sitting around and carry 5 shipments. Just call up UPS. The common carrier is going to do better. But it doesn't take long at this rate for the variable cost to start overcoming this little $5,000 you got to invest to do a contract. Quickly the contract becomes the lower cost option, and it hangs on for a long way as the lowest cost option until you start getting a very high amount of deliveries where the leasing becomes most cost effective. And I don't have to show you a graph to understand it. I think most of you would understand that right away. Yeah, right. I don't want to get in the trucking business until I got a big volume. And even then, you better make sure that this volume is realistic, it's stable, at least stable over the long run of the lease of the trucks, those kind of things. And that's where you get into the engineering econ, the time value money, and the payback period, those kind of questions that are important on many projects. I know a lot of times in the government world that we live in, it's kind of not. It's sort of like, well, we got our budget, and our budget's here. It's not quite the same as it is in business, the profit motivation, but it still is. It still is. Okay, so now what they want to do is just do a little math on those intersection points. And so they're looking at what I call the break-even point, or they're calling it the indifference point. The real line is, what they're saying is, at what number of shipments does each of the options become the preferred option? So the first one, we're comparing the common carrier to the contract carrier, and they're just saying, well, when is their cost equal? And that's all they're going to do is solve a little algebraic equation. 11 shipments, you can see that's about what it looked like on the graph, doesn't it? Yeah, right around 10. Yeah. And then they're going to do the same thing comparing the contractor to leasing. So there's the contractor cost equation equal to the leasing. Where are they equal? 64 shipments. So to me, an indifference point, break-even point, where do you not care between the two options? That's why they call it indifference. All right, so now they're turning the plot a different way. And again, you understand why people do this kind of stuff. It depends on who you're communicating with. How do they want to see it? Do they want to see total cost? Do they want to see a cost per shipment? Because sometimes maybe you visualize things different. I kind of like this one. Hey, look, the UPS version, yeah, it's fixed cost, $750 per shipment. Now, I don't care what 1 or 1,000 shipments. And then you can see the contract and the leasing both are obviously decreasing per shipment based on the number of shipments you have. Cost goes down. And somewhere out here, as you get up to the 64, okay, the lease finally drops lower. I kind of like that graph. Just a different way of looking at the same thing, coming to the same conclusion. Again, just like engineering econ, I always tell the classes that if you look at things different ways, but you come to different conclusions, it really bothers me. I don't like that. One of your ways is probably not correct, unless they're looking at different, truly different things. You know, but if we're trying to look at the same thing, i.e. cost, and we come up with a different conclusion with different graphs, that would bother me. Okay, so let's see. So now, they're twisting it around a little bit and saying, look, let's look at 3 different demand scenarios, which, why you're doing this? Well, now we're taking a different perspective. We kind of have this cost perspective. We had a graph versus demand. Now we're drilling down, and we're going to say, well, let's really consider what our market is. You know, the graph just went from 0 to 100 without considering, well, what is realistic? What's the probability we're going to get 0 or 100? And so they're saying, okay, look, they've looked at their market and they've kind of categorized it into 3 different categories: low, medium, and high. Now, you know, again, you're not going to be shocked. We already knew the break-even points. So the winner here, the contract carrier in the low and the medium, we already knew. You know, it was the best between 11 and 64. And then once you got up to 75, this high demand, the leasing option was best. But what does this do? It does a couple things, and we'll be able to use it in the next slides too. It does let you look at the difference a little bit. You know, since you've got 3 points, and you can think that these are equally likely or unequally likely, we'll assign probabilities to them. But you can also see how close they are. Because if you think, say you think, well, I'm very unlikely to ever go over 75 shipments, say. Well, you know, look, there's not a whole, you're not saving a whole lot of money between the leasing and having the contract. I would think if I thought 75 was my highest demand I ever had, I don't believe I'd get in the trucking business to save a mere $3,000. Because there's and why, and I'm trying to give you, you know, a feel for that there's too much risk, you know, to be a trucker. Plus, it's not your main business, right? You're a fish company. You're not a trucking company. And so you know, knowing how close they are, I'd say, man, I probably wouldn't make that decision unless I think the demand goes higher. But comparing these two, I certainly would make that decision. Wow, let's go and get a contract. I'm saving, you know, it's more than double the cost. Yeah, don't do that. Yeah. So you get a little bit of feel for the scale. All right. Let's see. So now they're going to look and use that kind of data to come up with an expected value of the shipping cost or expected value of the capacity demand. So it's going to somehow come to put all your costs, your revenues, profits, whatever, whether it's a cost. In this case, in the initial case, it was only a cost-only option, right? We're just going to make shipments. We didn't talk about revenues. You can expand it to talk about revenues, and they do in the next examples. But we're going to come up with an expected value of this project, if you will, and what it's going to be is the C, which is the cost, revenue, profit. Again, it depends on what you're looking at. The cost for a particular option, and the option is at a demand level I, and the probability that occurs. And then we've got a bunch of different, you know, common carrier, the J index, that's the common or the contract or the leasing. So we're going to have 3 different options, different demand levels, and a probability associated with that demand level. We can come up with an expected value. So you're basically solving the problem multiple times, assigning a probability to that solution, forming that product and adding them up and saying, okay, that's what I think the expected value is. So yeah, so let's see. So they're going back to that chart we had. Remember we had, but they should have tied them together. Look, their low demand now is 30, their medium is 50, and their high is 80. So it's not quite the table we had before. And they want to know what's the expected cost of the different options. And they've assigned probabilities to the occurrence of the different demands. Wow, there's where you got a lot of fuzziness in your estimation, right? I mean, where did you get this? You know, was it from a very detailed market survey? I mean, we're inundated with the polls now. You know, what's their accuracy? And again, what I keep saying is, if this is my analysis, I'm probably going to put some sensitivity on this. And that's a good point when you come down here and they talk about Monte Carlo simulation. That's one of the things I like to use all the time for my sensitivities. And you know, basically it's simply just doing a bunch of replications of a simulation. And you know, something like this, an expected value calculation, you saw, that's not a difficult calculation. It's not hard to put that in Excel and redo it a bunch of times, right? And then and if you have some variability in this, if I said, it's not 25%, but it's 20 to 30, or 59 to 61, you can let this variability influence each of your answers, and now you've got a statistical distribution on your expected value, and you've got a much more solid argument to make. I'm not just going to come out with one number, this is my expected value, I'm good to go. I'll have a 95% confidence interval, or I'll have a histogram. In the examples I'll show you today, I'll build a histogram. And now you'll have a lot stronger understanding, because you can look at the histogram, you can see, like we talked before, you can look at the range, you can look, is it a steep curve, is it a tight mean, is it got a lot of standard deviation, meaning a lot of uncertainty. So you can say a lot more about it, and you can communicate it a lot more mathematical to your managers. They're going to be a lot happier hearing, I'm 95% confident it falls in this interval, then I think it costs $3,112. Okay. It's a little bit like my Duolingo when I'm playing at night with my foreign language, and I work it in my phone, and it tells me, oh, you're 18% fluent in French. And I get the biggest kick out of that, because I want it to tell me I'm 18.39% fluent, and give me an extra decimal every day, So to me, all these things are a range, and it makes you look more credible when you come up with statistical range. Even if you apply a variability in an almost unknown way, say I, instead of putting 25%, say, well, let me at least put plus or minus 1% on that, at least, because we know it's not a fixed number. So let's make the calculation anyway with our fixed numbers. So right here, they're going to do the math just for the contract one, the one that had the 5,000 and the 300 variable, and then they'll just give the answers for the other two. But they're showing you where these numbers come from. So they're looking for the cost at the low demand, the fixed cost, the variable, there was your demand. Cost for the medium demand, again, they all three same fixed costs, obviously. The 50 demand at the medium, there's your cost. The high demand, 80, there's your cost. They should get higher as they go along. And remember, this is 25%, 60, and 15. So now they got getting the expected value. Low times this percentage, medium times this percentage, high times this percentage, boom, got an expected value. Now they made these same calculations for the common guy and the leasing option, applied, of course, obviously the same percentages. And that's interesting. I can even see where the percentages could be a function of your option. I could have a higher percentage of in a different scenario of being able to meet this demand, at least if I had this option. Anyway, that's kind of off the wall, but there. So now you've got the three options, their cost. So now you can say, okay, under these scenarios, low, medium, and high, with these probabilities of them occurring, my best option is a contract. Yeah, again, I'm not surprised, because you had the highest probability of achieving the medium demand, right? And so we already looked, the graph told us that the contract was best at the medium demand. But it's another way of looking at it, a little bit stronger mathematical way of expressing your results. And you don't have to do just cost. This could be any number of ways to look at something. This little technique of applying a probability, solving for it under different scenarios, applying a probability to the scenarios, and coming up with some probabilistically balanced value, a weighted value. How's that for the word? Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so there we go. So now we can apply this same technique and describe it a different way in a decision tree. So all that's going to do is have a graphical way of showing what we just did. And we're going to go from left to right. Each little ball is going to be a decision point. They're going to have probabilities, and then we're going to sum up these expected values. And you can go backwards by calculating the whole value. So let's look at one, and we'll know what it is. Yeah, outcomes are circles, decisions are squares. So here we go. Right. So we could build this. We could have one decision lead to another. So we want to select an option, whether it's the lease, the UPS carrier, or the contract. each time, we've got 3 different demands. Yep, okay, 30, 50, 80, 30, 50, 80, 30, 50, 80. Okay, so we can each assign the values that we calculated on the previous slide there. And this is your expected value. And we could go backwards from there if we needed to. You know, if this were, if these had a percent on them, maybe we've got a different percentage possibility. We're not picking on expected value, we're picking on some manager, and you think, okay, well, this manager's got this percent, this percent, and this percent for choosing one of these options because his brother-in-law owns this or something. Then you could actually move this expected value back to here and have the expected value of the whole thing. Yeah, that's a bad example, but anyway, just a different way of displaying precisely the same thing we had on the last view graph. Okay. All right, now let's see, we're going to look at break-even point. And so what they're saying here is, you know, when do you start having enough income from your shipments to overcome your fixed costs? So obviously we can't answer that yet with our example because we haven't discussed anything about revenue. We just said we've got a shipment cost. So we've got to come up with some sort of how much money are we making each shipment. That's how much we're spending to ship it, and that was our fixed cost. So let's look at some of the break-evens. Let's get a revenue. So hey, we make $1,000 on each of these shipments that we do. Now we can answer where are we going to break even? All right. Well, with the contract carrier, the UPS version, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, we start making a profit first shipment. We make $1,000. We spend $750 per shipment. Okay, we make one. We'll go make $250 and keep on going. But you can throw it in the equation if you want. You know, no fixed cost. Revenue is $1,000 minus $750. Okay, and we can do that for each of the other two. The contract, $5,000. We made $700. Remember, it was a $300 cost per shipment. We made $1,000. So we're going to have to go 8 shipments before we make any money off of them. And then the trucking, we're making a lot more per shipment, but the upfront cost is more. 23 shipments before we make money there. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. And you spend more, you got to sell more to even break even. And that's, to me, that's always the challenge in a business world, I think. I mean, I bought a laundromat once just for fun, just to see. I wanted a business that I could do without quitting my day job. So I looked at it, I was like, well, what can I do? I could do a laundromat, I could do a car wash, you know, things that vending machines, something I don't have to be there during the day. So I said, well, I'll try laundromat. I need to try business. And to me, this was a big deal. There was a lot of fixed costs, you know, the rent on the building, the utility bills, the license fees to operate. If you looked at my laundromat, it really didn't start making money until about day 23 or 24 in the month. By the time you paid all the fixed fees and balanced them with the variable cost of the gas bill going up. And so that's not a good business in my mind, because you're tied to these last few days. So even a month like February, your cash flow is worse. You know, you'd think, well, no, gosh, only 3 days, or 3 days, or in this case this year, 2 days less. But well, if you're not making money till day 25, then that's a 30% difference, a significant difference anyway. I got out of the laundromat business, but it was a good thing to do when my kids were in high school. It was up by the high school. I could have them open, and I could have them help me clean. That's a good lesson learned, But then, what stopped me the most on that business was I kept worrying about liability. I kept afraid that somebody would come in there and slip on a puddle on the floor, and then sue me, and then every nickel I'd made was completely gone instantaneously. Yeah, that's probably a likely scenario. Get out of this business. Yeah. Okay, learning curves. Learning curves are a way to reflect the fact that you're going to get better doing something the more times you do it. And they always express it as and getting better, generally, they say usually labor, you usually think of it as hours, how many hours. It doesn't have to be, right? It could be other things. It could be utilization of fixtures or things. But in general, hours seems to make sense. And they generally express it in an equation like this, where you've got T, I'll probably wind up saying time again, but it's the number of resources to do the nth unit, unit number n. T1 is the number of resources, generally hours, that it takes to do the first unit. N is your counter, right? First unit, second unit, third unit, fourth unit. And then B is this learning curve exponent, okay? Which is the log of the learning percentage divided by the log of 2. And I actually, I'll probably I'll probably post it. I got a little derivation of how that works, but and what the percentage is you express that I improve by a certain percentage as I double my number of units. And they'll show that in the next view graph. So I got an amount of time, say, it takes me to build the first unit. Then I can measure the time it takes to build the second unit, and I got, say, 10% better. So this would be 90%. Then I would look and measure the time on the fourth unit. And this equation is only applicable if that percentage is the same for each doubling period. So if it's 90%, my second unit, my first unit would take 1 hour, say. My second unit would take 0.9 hours. My fourth unit would take 0.81 hours, etc. Then you can apply this equation to calculate the time for any one particular unit. So if you were asked, well, how much does it take to make the first 8? Then you'd have to add up, time 1, time 2, time 3, time 4. So anyway, let's look at it. Let's look at it. So they got a call center, and you can see the data, the first, second, fourth, 8th unit. And their percentage is the same. It's 80%, right? First one took 5 minutes. 80% of that is 4 minutes. 80% of 4 minutes is 3.2 minutes. 80% of 3.2 is 2.56. They've also just inverted that to measure its productivity. So this is the time per call, calls per time. Okay. Again, it's looking at the same thing. How do you want to express it? What makes more sense? What can you communicate to people with? So let's derive that learning curve equation. And you say, well, why would you derive that equation? Well, maybe I want to know how much it takes to make the 100th unit, right? Or the 1000th unit, and I don't want to sit there and keep doing 0.8, or I don't want to take 0.8 to the nth power or something like that, or I want to build it in a model, which I've done. So there's the curve, what it looks like for versus unit, time versus unit, and here's our equation. It was 20, let's see, yeah. 25, let's see, T1, resources required for the first unit. Okay. And I see their log of 0.8, or the log of 0.2. Oh yeah, oh, I see what you're doing. Oh gosh, it confused me. Yeah, I didn't read my view graph. The 25th one. Yeah. Okay, so they've got the equation, T n equals T1 and n is 25. And there's your 80%, which you can't see because of the focus, but it's the log of 80% over the log of 2. There's your 25, that was your n, so there's your exponent. It takes 1.78 minutes. Now, we start at 5, 4, 3.2. Now, a couple of comments on learning curve. You know it doesn't keep on going to infinity, but if you do, the infinite unit is going to take no time. That doesn't make any sense. So I know when I applied it out of Y12 when we were using it on our model, we cut it off. At some point in time, have your equation say, hey, we're done learning. This is the best we're going to do. And it can't take 0 time to do something. There's a bottom line. So stop it, drop it into have a threshold. The second, if for some weird reason you didn't have data measured on the doubling, but you had, the 5th or the 10th, I can see how you could have every 10th, 1, 10, 100. It's a simple conversion. Instead of 2, it's whatever you measure, 10 or 3, and I can show you that derivation. That's unusual. Most of the time you'd have the time for every unit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's not an issue, but you could do that if somehow you got a weird set of data. All right, let's see, and there's the graph. All right, so now they want to summarize kind of what we did. So think about it. We looked at cost, we looked at learning curve, we looked at demand, we looked at expected value, and there's other things you might want to include when you're evaluating capacity. you know, how important was this thing to your firm, like the trucking and the fish example? You don't want to be in the trucking business, you're in the fish business, maybe. You know, how much is the management going to have to deal with changing your bottlenecks or addressing your bottlenecks? Yeah, your need for flexibility, the fish business goes bad, are you going to start shipping, you know, scallops or something like that? You know, and how does it change? You know, it would change. I think if you're shipping big shipments of fish versus small shipments of shrimp or something, it would change. All right. So now, shifting gears. So now again, like I said, it's like shotgun. Gosh, we got broad stuff. So see, we've defined, we've now evaluated, we've done Ellison's fish market. So now we're going to get into Tracy here. But Tracy, we've got to talk about constraints. And I think I can go through this quickly, because I think you guys have already done this in the lean class, and so I won't dwell on this. But you know, their point they're making with their graph is, hey, something's your bottleneck, right? It's like a pipe with water going through it. You know, I don't care how big this pipe is. There's your little one. That's what's going to, you know, dominate your flow. And so let's just look at that. So hey, you know, a bunch of processes here. It doesn't take you very long to say, oh, there's my slowing, 40 per hour is the best we're going to get out. You know, I don't care how quick this guy works. All he's going to do is pile inventory up right here. Or you know, this is always going to be done. Waiting on this one. And so, but those questions are important, and that's one of the reasons why I get down here. And I really am a proponent of simulation modeling. You know, I can look at this one and tell you what the throughput is, but you know what? If we've got multiple parallel branches and we've got multiple decisions. This is a variable. This is a variable, and you've got queues here, and the queues have logic in them too. Like they talk about it, and they don't touch on it, and they do mention it in the chapter about reneging. You know, you're sitting in the queue and you leave. You go to the bank, you wait 10 minutes, you're finally tired, you leave. Do you come back? Do you not? That all affects your throughput or your expected value if you're trying to measure the value of a process. And that you can't just sit here and look at that and make a calculation like that. You need a tool, and that's where these tools come in. Right? So the theory of constraints you talked about during the lean. And they're going to go through about 5 or 6 view graphs on that. And all they're trying to do is, you know, point out, and that's this Tracy example. You know, you identify the bottleneck, deal with it, go to the next bottleneck. Deal with that, go to the next bottleneck until you balance the line. And all the bottlenecks are the same. Then you can move the whole thing up if you want. Yeah, so their example, they're looking at a hair shop. She's got 3, I think she got a stylist, and stylist, a cashier, and a shampooer. They each have a rate. They each have a rate of pay, and let's see, they each have throughput, right? So the shampooer, the cutter is your bottleneck. You can only do 4 an hour, and so that's going to define your total profit. It's going to define what your business can do, and you can hire 20 shampooers and 20 cashiers. And it's still not going to matter. So let's see. So they plot it. This is a good way to look at it, I think. So they've made up a demand. They said they got 10 people an hour showing up at this, potentially 10 people an hour showing up at the shop. And then how can you handle them? Well, you know, collecting the money can handle a bunch. I'd fire that guy. You know, and then the shampooer a little more, and then the stylist was your bottleneck. Yeah, because they were the 4 per hour. So the most you can do is 4 per hour. So your income is going to be $100 because it was $25 a cut, 4 per hour, and then your outgo was your hourly rate on everybody, right? $10, $20, $45. So your profit's $55. So we can look at it from a cost perspective. We can look at it from a throughput perspective. We can look at it, from a profit perspective, and if we could assign some probability to these demands. We could look at it from that perspective, and we could also look at it from a utilization perspective if we want, those kind of things. All right, so let's go next. Let's see. So now what happened? So now, Tracy cloned herself, got another stylist, and can do 8 haircuts an hour. So we transferred the bottleneck to the shampooer. Okay, now 6 is our bottleneck. Okay, so hey, our new income is 6 times 25. But our new cost, we added $20 an hour because we had to pay the new stylist. So our profit went up. Okay, that's good. Well, can we keep going? Should we add a new shampooer? Yeah, let's see what happens there. But we know what's going to happen. You can see we had a new shampooer, And now our bottleneck is not us, you know, it's the demand. So, you know, now we have to deal with that, and there's where you don't have perhaps the management control. Well, what do? You advertise, you move your shop, you know, you do something to try to, you know, up that, because that's what's controlling you now, right? So we had 10 an hour, 250, our new profit, yeah, we still going up, still doing better. Tracy's making money, a lot better than I did on the laundry, man, yes. Better way to go. So, you know, and you saw all this with your lean class. Okay, and this is the waiting line theory, and we'll finish that, and then we can go on into there, even though this is the advanced version of the waiting line theory. And so what they're trying to do is they're looking at statistics and arrivals and service times, and they're going to come up with how long do you wait, how long are you in the process. So this is where the statistics part gets tied in, and they give you some tools to calculate it for some simple cases. And I would say to you, this is good if you can fit your process or your example or whatever you're doing into one of these simple cases. Use it. It's good in another way too. Suppose you do build a complex discrete event model. Well, why don't you cut out a lot of the complexity and run it and compare it to one of these cases at the start. So at least you can say, look, at least this piece of my model is working as the theory predicts. It's giving me the right numbers. Now I can add the reneging, or I can add the complex function on my times, or I can add this other logic, and at least I know I'm starting from a solid base. So to me, that's what these kind of hand calculations are good for. Yeah, they're limited, but they set the stage. They get you thinking. They do low-level verification. So they're good. So anyway, we're going to statistically look at this. So you know, and you're going to ask questions about things. What percentage are you busy? How long you wait in line? How many customers will be in line? How can they be affected by the arrival rate and the service time? So the big example they're going to do real quick is a drive-up window. You know, a McDonald's drive-through. It's an easy one. It's an easy one to comprehend and understand. So okay, now just in your face. Here you go. Arrivals are modeled by this. Yay! What is that? Well, you know, when you have the statistics class, which is coming next semester, it's a Poisson distribution. It's common to model arrivals. It's common, like nuclear decay, arrivals per given period of time, arrivals per given region in space. And so I would say for now, don't look at it and say, my God, what is that? It's really not bad. So it's the probability of N arrivals in a time period T is this, where this is your rate, lambda is your rate, T is the number of time periods you had, N is the number of arrivals, that's N factorial, remember it, that's E, can't see it, E to the minus lambda T. So that's how they're going to model arrivals in these little calculations. And then they're going to model the service time, the time you work on the arrival, with an exponential distribution, and it's characterized by a single parameter mu. So now it's like all of a sudden, if you haven't had statistics, like what in the world are you throwing at me? You know, so you know, random numbers are characterized by distributions. Different distributions have different parameters that characterize them. Some have 1, some have 2, some have 3. This particular one is a simple one that has 1, and it is a very common one to model the service times. It's also a common one to model arrivals at a bank and things like that. And you can, if you build a simulation model, use a tool like that, you can choose to change these distributions. How much does the distribution affect me? You know, how much does my assumption on arrivals affect? And what if I make my arrivals be constant? Now, that's one of the nice things about a tool like that. Okay, so here we go. Your McDonald's. Customers are arriving at a rate of 3 per minute. That's the lambda. And if the number of arrivals follows the Poisson distribution, yeah, that was the previous distribution. It's named after Poisson, not the fish. It's the probability that 2 or, so they want to know what's the probability that 2 or fewer customers arrive in a minute. So the Poisson rate is 3 per minute. So what they're asking is, well, that's not, they're not saying it's the average rate, because this is a distribution. That's, and so they're asking you, well, what is the probability that we don't have the line full? You know, we're trying to accommodate 3, what about 1 or 2? So the probability of that is the probability that you have none arrive, or the probability that you have 1 arrive, or the probability that you have 2 arrive. So how do you calculate that? Oh, okay, yeah, let me write that down, because it needed a step. Right, so we said it was lambda, that's not very thick, and I'll turn it sideways. I'll do this lambda e to the nth, right?
You couldn't possibly use another color.
I could easily use another color. The UT orange is just not doing it, is it?
Yeah.
I picked purple because I really like purple. Yeah, let's try this. How's this? Yeah. Lambda t to the nth, or n, like 12, right? E to the minus lambda t. Was that the right equation? Yeah. Okay. All right, so let me plug it in for you, so you see, because they kind of just get you in the face with it. So the first one, p of 0 is lambda, I'll make a square bracket. Lambda was 3, remember? 3 arrivals per minute, t was 1 minute. The unit's got to be the same, right? If I got arrivals per hour, I better have t in hours. Don't do that. Never do that. N, 0. We want to know what's the probability of 0 arrivals, p0. I would have probably written that down here like they did the other one. Over 0 factorial, e to the minus 3 times 1. Let's put it over here. 3, 1, 0. This is probability 0. Remember 0 factorial is 1? That's its definition. Makes it work out nice mathematically. Anything with 0 power is 1. So this is e to the minus 3, which turned out to be, it's actually slightly less than 0.05. And then the 1, I'll do it real quick for you. So this would be, this didn't change, right? The only thing that changed on the exponent is here and here. The first power over 1 factorial. This didn't change either. So the easy way to look at this